Hi everybody, welcome to our live event. My name is Brenda K.B. Anderson and I'm a designer and an instructor for crochet, knitting, and sewing. And I'm very excited today to share with you guys a knitted project. This is a little bit of a bigger project than I normally share in these live events, but trust me, it goes quickly. So I was able to get this done for this live event today. So this is what we're gonna be making. This is called the Boardwalk top. It is written up as in a pattern that's very size inclusive. It goes from, let's see, the finished circumference, so measured around here, is 36.5 inches up to 70.5 inches, which is 92.5 centimeters up to 179 centimeters. So this will fit just about everybody. And you can adjust things as you like. We're going to be talking our way all the way, and I'm going to be demonstrating all the way through this project so you'll know how to make it for yourself. So I'm going to be demonstrating every step along the way, so make sure that you guys download the instructions because you're going to need these. So as I said, this is written up in a whole bunch of different sizes, so I'm not going to be able to tell you specific stitch counts and that sort of thing as we're working through because there's so many sizes and I don't want anyone to get confused. But I will be explaining like how to just the basics of reading this pattern in case you're not super familiar with something that's sized to a whole bunch of sizes as you're reading your pattern. Because I know a lot of people have, if you're a little bit newer to knitting, you might have some questions about that. So this is a very beginner friendly project. It is quick to make. It's made with a number 4 yarn. Let me just double check. Oh, it's a number 3 yarn, but it really kind of feels almost like a number 4. We're going to be knitting them up on size 8, like a US size 8 needle, which is 5 millimeters. So it's slightly larger probably than I would normally use for this size yarn, but I wanted a very airy and drapey top so it goes really quickly. So you can still make it for the summer. Okay, so let's just first talk a little bit about the materials you're going to be needing. So obviously we're going to need some yarn. I am using a yarn that is about half cotton, half bamboo, because I chose this because I wanted it to, be good for summer heat, but also have that really nice drape. You can see it just hangs really nicely. And so for that reason, because of the bamboo cotton mixture, when you knit up this top, you don't have to worry quite as much about getting the exact size perfect. You just do your best to find the correct size, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. But it really kind of, because the fabric is so flowy, it's not stiff at all. It's just going to kind of drape over you in a flattering way. So that also helps take the pressure off a little bit, because I think when we're making a knitted project, you do not want to spend all that time making something and then try it on and have it not look flattering or have it look how you envisioned it to. So speaking of the sizing, I mentioned what sizes the pattern includes, and if you're trying to figure out what size to make, what I would recommend is going into your wardrobe and finding a top that has this type of shape. Even if you don't have something like this, you could just use a looser fitting t-shirt and then measure straight across your t-shirt underneath where the sleeves are, underneath the arm's eye, and take that measurement and find a similar measurement. It could be a little bit bigger, could be a little bit smaller from the finished measurements here in the pattern download. Another thing that I find very, very helpful when I'm making garments is, looking at the schematic, which we have here on page 6. This is a good way to see what all the dimensions are going to be, so you can kind of compare it to something you already have. You could compare it to your body measurements. It just makes things a little bit easier to figure out what size you're going to be making. So I rely on the schematic almost as much or more than I rely on all the other sizing information in patterns. Just because it's just laid out there, you can see, across the chest, that's measured from here to there, from the top shoulder to the hem, that's measured from this point here down to there. You can see that line right there. Width across the shoulder, so we have that measurement here. The width across the neck opening, we have that measurement here. So that should help you a little bit with the sizing as well. All right, so you're gonna need your pattern downloaded, and you're also gonna need some yarn. Depending on the size you're making, you're either going to need 2 or 3 cakes of this yarn, and the exact brand, the color, and everything is listed in your pattern in case you're curious what I used. But this is a number 3, like I said before, about half cotton, about half bamboo yarn, and it has some really nice drape to it, and it's very soft. It's great for summer. And then, of course, you're going to need some knitting needles. Now, I'm going to be using circular needles because they're easier to show in the video, and they're not, the ends aren't clicking on the table and swinging around so much. So I generally, even if I could use straight needles, I will almost always use circular needles in my demos. But you could use straight needles if you want to. Now, for the larger sizes, maybe for the larger half of the sizes, it may be a little more weight than you want on your wrists as you're knitting. Or for anybody who has any trouble with, your wrists hurting as you're knitting, I would recommend using the circular needles, because then the weight of your project is not, it can kind of hang on that cable there, and it's not going to be pulling on the needles that you're holding in your hand, if that makes sense. So you can use straight needles, you can use circular needles, whatever you happen to have. And because this is so drapey and stretchy, I was able to make one of the panels, actually, for this top I made on a 16-inch circular needle, like the size that I would normally use for a hat, because that's what I had, and I was too lazy to go upstairs and get another needle. So it does fit pretty well on that. I had no problems with that, but so if that's just what you have, you can use that. But I would recommend a longer needle if you happen to have it, like 36-inch needle, or 24, if you happen to have those, just because you'll have a little bit more space and you can kind of spread it out and look at it as you're creating it, just to make sure it's the width that you imagined that it was going to be. Okay, so you just need yarn, a needle, and a couple of stitch markers. So I'm using these removable stitch markers. If you don't have that style of stitch marker, that's okay. You can just use safety pins, or even a bobby pin would probably work for this. And that is just as we're working our way across the top of the shoulder line, I have you mark a couple of spaces just to give you an idea on where that shoulder seam should be later, to give you a place to start. So that's what those are for. And that's really it. So not a lot of materials, not a lot of investment in the cost of this project, and it's a really fun knit. So I hope you guys are excited about this project. All right, so obviously this is a live event, like I mentioned before. I love it when you guys say hi, or if you want to ask questions in the chat. I'll be responding to those during this live event. So, definitely let me know if there's anything that's unclear or you need any help, or if you have advice for other knitters or anything like that. And we've got some hellos already. A hello from Michigan, from Creative Wan, or Wan. And then Crochet Girly 96 says, good morning. Good morning. Hi. Thanks you guys for saying hello. I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to get started, and first let me just talk just a little bit about the construction of this top. So we're gonna talk about the top here at the shoulders. So basically this top is so beginner friendly because it is just a square, and you might be saying, that doesn't look like a square, Brenda. I mean, it's mostly a rectangle, and then the top looks like there's some complicated shaping, but it's the easiest shaping ever. So all these little lines here where you can kind of see the table in between, those are dropped stitches. They're just very elongated knit stitches here. And we're gonna get into that, and that's a very easy thing to do, so don't be worried about that. And you can see that up here in this very top row, we have some of those drop stitches running across, and then the drop stitches stop right here, and then they start again here. Now, the way that we get this nice shaping in here for the shoulders and the neckline to come down, so it has that flattering look and also does not feel like it's choking you, which I love, is we're going to be making drop stitches taller or shorter. And I'll be showing you how to do that. We're gonna be walking through this whole process. But I just wanted to point this out in case you were like not sure if this seemed like a little too, like too much involved. It's a very, very simple project. So here we have some drop stitches where we wrap the needle twice. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay. We have 2 wraps here, and then 3 wraps up here where it gets taller, and then 2 wraps here, 1 wrap there, and then no wraps. And we'll get into what the wrapping thing is, but basically it's a way to to basically make those elongated stitches and to control exactly how tall those stitches get. So that right there, the height of the stitches growing and then shrinking a little bit here, that is what is shaping our shoulders on both sides. And it's a really simple thing to do. And we're gonna start from the top, work our way down. So once we do this one row where we have to actually, count how many stitches and pay attention to our pattern, then it's just sort of like, smooth sailing after that to complete the rest of it. And you are also able, because we're working top down, you're going to be able to add more length to your top if you want it to be longer. This was a slightly cropped top on purpose. I think it looks cute that way, but not everybody likes that style. Other people might find a longer top, suiting their needs a little bit more, and that's no problem. You just can keep on knitting in the pattern, and I'll explain that a little bit later. But you may need to just buy an extra ball of yarn just in case. You can look at the yarn requirements, and if yours is kind of getting close to where you're going to need three yarn cakes, then if it's close to that, then just buy that third one. All right, so let's get started working on our project. So I'm going to be doing a smaller swatch here, so that you guys can see all the different stitches, and I'm going to be kind of switching back and forth and kind of explaining things with these other pieces as well. But just know I am not going to be knitting all the way across like a full-size top, because you guys are going to get bored, I think, watching me do that many knit stitches in a row and having to wait to the next set of instructions. So we're going to start off with, just depending on your size, you're going to have to, let me mention this first. I would recommend making the gauge swatch. The gauge swatch, we're not going to work through the gauge swatch in this, but after you watch this video, or while you're watching this video, you'll be able to see all of these steps that we're going to be doing in the gauge swatch. This is just a smaller section of the top. So all the instructions, I'll be showing you how to do all of these things, but I'm not actually making the gauge swatch. I'm making something close to the gauge swatch instead. I'll go into that in a little more detail in just a second. So depending on what size you're making, so actually let me back up a second here and let me show you. Right here we have the finished measurements of the top, okay? So this is just explained for those of you who aren't as comfortable reading a knitting pattern. We're going to start out with, there's a number outside of a set of parentheses. So there's a set of parentheses here, and then there's a set of parentheses there. That's because we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different sizes that you can choose from to make. The smallest size, so the extra small, the instructions for that is going to be right here outside of the parentheses. But if you're making one of the other sizes, you're going to find the instructions for that particular size. Like, let's just say you're making an extra large. The finished measurement, finished circumference of your extra large, if you look down here, so the extra large is shown as the last number within the first set of parentheses. So here's the first set of parentheses, 53. So that would be the circumference of an extra large top. If you were making an extra small, the circumference would be 36.5. If you were making a 3X, that would be the second number within the second group of parentheses. So here's the second group of parentheses, and the second number would be right here. It would be 62. Okay, so what you're doing to find your specific instructions is first you decide what size you want to make, and you can look at the measurements, you can look at the schematic, like I said, and then I would go through the pattern and just highlight the number. Anytime you see parentheses, highlight the number that corresponds to your size. Okay, so you can also see the length from top of shoulder to the hemline. That's also laid out here for you as well for all of the different sizes, arranged in the same way as I just explained. And also how many cakes you need. So this is for the extra small, this would be the extra large, this would be the 4X right here. So you just compare where these sizing, I guess, numbers are compared to where these numbers are here. Okay, so they should be in the same location within the parentheses. And then once you get to the instructions, you will see things like this. So we have cast on 66, or in parentheses, we've got 72, 80, 88, 96, and then, a bunch more numbers here too. So these numbers are referring to those same sizes we just talked about. So this would be the extra small, this would be the extra large, this would be the 5X right here. So they all correspond, okay? And when you see down here in the instructions, you'll see some instructions that say purl 1, and then 2 yarn overs, and then it'll say 9, and then in parentheses 10, 12, 14, 15, then in the second set of parentheses 17, 19, 20, 23 times. What that means is you're doing the thing that's in the bracket, and you're doing it the number of times that it specifies according to what size you're making. So if you're making the extra small, you do this in the brackets 9 times. If you were doing the extra large, you would do what's in the brackets 15 times. Okay, so that's just your crash course in reading the pattern, just in case you need a little bit extra help. I did put another link in this download in case you want to watch a video that's a little more in depth on how to read patterns and what all that means. But I just wanted those of you who are beginners to know what all that stuff is all about. Okay, so depending on the size you're making, you're going to cast on the appropriate number of stitches, and you can use your cast on of choice. I like to use a German twisted cast on here because it does give it a little bit of stretch, and I do like that through the neckline so that it just kind of hangs nicely. But I have also used the long tail cast on, and that's worked just fine too. That's not as stretchy. That worked great. So if you have a favorite cast on, you can go ahead and use that. So I'm going to start with my slip knot, and I'm just going to use the German twisted cast on, which I'll show you here. So I'm going to place my needle in the loop, and then I'm going to hold the strand that's connected to the ball in the back, like away from me, and then the other strand, that's the end of the yarn, is going to be in front. And just to be on the super safe side and have a little bit of extra yarn for stitching, if you just estimate, the number of stitches as inches, if you just look at this, then you should be fine for your long tail. So if you were casting on the smallest size, you could just estimate about 66 inches or about 2 yards-ish as your beginning tail. You will probably have leftovers, but we can use that for seaming later, so it doesn't hurt to have a little extra. Okay, so then I'm going to hold this in the slingshot position, and I'm going to place my needle down around here over the top of that thumb loop, and then we're going to go across and over that strand and pull that through that little triangle right there. I'll do that again. So down around here and over the top and down through that thumb loop. Then we're going to move across the top of the finger strand, and then we're going to pull the tip of the needle through this little tiny triangle here and drop it off with your thumb. So I'll do that a few more times so you can see what I'm doing. But like I said, if there's another cast on you'd prefer using, that's okay as well. Okay, I'm going to do them a little faster. I'm just going to cast on somewhere around 20 stitches to do this sample. But you would be, casting on the full amount for your full sweater after you make your gauge swatch. If you want to make your gauge swatch, you're going to cast on 18 stitches here. And then you'll follow the gauge swatch instructions. But in order to know how to do all of the different techniques in that, you can just go ahead and watch this video and you will learn all that you need to know here for those dropped stitches. Everything else is really straightforward. All right, so that looks like enough just to start demonstrating with here. Could probably do a few more, but the beginning, before I switch to the next sample, these stitches are all very straightforward, so I'm not going to do quite 20 here. So once you get them all cast on, you're going to purl across. So I'm going to do my purl stitches, one in each of these. I'm just going to purl all the way across, one purl in each stitch across here. Just a couple more left. All right, then we're going to knit the next row. So rows 1 and 2 are just rows number 1. Row number 1 is just purling across. Row number 2 is just knitting across. All right, there we are. So we've got our first 2 rows done. And of course, you know, if you had cast on the appropriate number of stitches, it would be much wider than this. And then we're going to start row number 3. And so row number 3 is that row we were talking about before where we had the taller stitches and the shorter stitches, and that's what shapes that, you know, that neckline to come down and the shoulders to kind of slope a little bit. So this might look a little overwhelming. I'm going to walk you through it. But just know you're going to have to be paying attention to the numbers that correspond to your size. So I would definitely recommend going through and highlighting all the numbers that are, you know, pertinent to your size so that you don't have to look at the rest of them, just so you don't lose your place. I'm going to switch over to this next sample here because I'm actually going to be working my way all across a full size sample for this row just to make it a little bit more sense because we have a lot of a variation within the stitches here. Okay, so we just finished off doing our knit row, okay? And I'm gonna start out with row number 3. This here is the smallest size that is included, so I'm going to be following the numbers that come right before the parentheses, like this will be 9 times. This will be 10 times, okay? So we're going to start out by doing a purl 1, so just 1 purl stitch here. So purl 1, and then we're going to make 2 yarn overs. It's abbreviated 2YO. So we're going to yarn over once and twice. And then we're going to do that 9 times. So we did it 1 time, and here's number 2. So purl, yarn over, yarn over. That was number 2. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Yarn over, yarn over. Okay, so now we're going to do the next step, which is purl 1, 3 yarn overs. So we'll do, and we're going to do that 10 times. So purl 1, and then 3 yarn overs. 1, 2, 3. So that was the first one. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Yarn over, yarn over, yarn over. And then we're going to move, and okay, so then our instructions tell us we're going to place a marker in the last purl that we just made. So we're going to take our stitch marker, and we finished really with 3 yarn overs. So we're going to look back to where that purl is, and you can see the little purl bump right there. I'm going to place my stitch marker right in that purl bump, right there. Oh, I'll have to redo my yarn overs. That's okay. Yarn over, yarn over, yarn over. All right, so now then we move on to the next part in the directions. So we're going to do a purl 1, 2 yarn overs 2 times, and then a purl 1, 1 yarn over 2 times. So purl 1, 2 yarn overs. So that was the first one. Purl 1, 2 yarn overs. Then we're going to do purl 1, 1 yarn over. And repeat that, purl 1, 1 yarn over. And then we're going to purl 20. So this is the section of the, like right below the neck that is kind of scooped down a little. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And then the next thing is we yarn over, then purl 1, and we're going to do that 2 times. So there's the first one, yarn over, purl 1, yarn over twice, 1, 2, purl 1, yarn over twice, 1, 2, purl 1. Then we're going to do 3 yarn overs and a purl 1, 1, 2, 3, purl 1. And then we're going to place a marker in the purl we just made. So I'll place it right in that little purl bump. Right there. And then, so we're right here. So we did 3 yarn overs, purl 1, place the marker in the purl just made. Then we're going to do 3 yarn overs, purl 1, and we're going to repeat that a total of 9 times for this size. So 1, 2, 3, purl 1, 1, 2, 3, purl 1. So that would be 2, 2, 3, and 3. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2, 3, and 5. 1, 2, 3, and 6. 1, 2, 3, and 7. 1, 2, 3, and 8. 1, 2, 3, and 9. And then we're going to do 2 yarn overs and purl 1, and we're going to do that 9 times. So 2 yarn overs, 1, 2, purl 1, 1, 2, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 5, 1, 2, 6, 1, 2, 7, 1, 2, 8, 1, 2, and 9. Okay, so that was the hardest work you're going to do in this whole project, all that counting and the yarn overs. You know, that row you really have to pay attention, make sure that you're getting everything in the right spot. Then we're going to do on row number 4. Oh, I want to mention too, there has been a correction made in this pattern. So if you did not download this today, if you downloaded it previous to today, then you may have an older version. So I want to just call this out. You may have to re-download it to get the corrected version. In row number 4, it should say knit across row, dropping any yarn over as you get to them. If it says something else, then you will want to download the newer version, because I tried to make the language clearer and clean things up a little bit in row 4, and then that also affected some of the other rows, how they were written, the repeats and that sort of thing. So I just wanted to let you know, if you've downloaded it today, it should be correct, but that's how you will know. Just go ahead and read your row number 4 after you download that, and make sure that it says the same thing mine does. Knit across row, dropping any yarn over as you get to them, and then another 2 sentences, or 1 sentence, I guess. Okay, so we're going to just be knitting all the way across, but when we get to the yarn overs, we're just going to let them fall off of our needle. So here's our first stitch. We're just gonna go ahead and knit that. And now we've gotten to the yarn overs. You can tell the yarn overs because there's a hole underneath them, right? They don't actually connect or come up from a stitch below. They're just kind of wrapped around the needle. So you can just pull those off. I usually use my thumb to just kind of push them off like that. But you can also use your right hand needle if that's more convenient, or however you like to do it, really doesn't matter. And now we can see this stitch right here is coming from the stitch below, so we're gonna knit that. So we knit the next stitch. Now we have some yarn overs, so we're gonna pull them off. So you can use your needle here to just pull them off. Don't worry about that loop for right now. And then we're gonna go ahead and knit this stitch. And you can tell that that is a stitch to knit because both legs of the stitch are coming out of the stitch below right here. So I'm gonna go ahead and knit that. And as we do this, we can start to pull up a little bit and elongate those stitches. It'll even everything out. So now we're going to knock those next 2 yarn overs off our needle and knit the next stitch. Knock the next 2 yarn overs off the needle, knit the next stitch. Okay, so you don't have to remember how many yarn overs there are, but it does help to be able to distinguish between these yarn overs and an actual stitch, right? If you're confused, if you can't see both legs of the stitch going into the stitch below, like for example, right here, it looks like this. Oh, did that come from this stitch? Okay, does that count? It's only 1 strand going into that stitch. It's not 2, like right here, okay? So we're just gonna pull that off the needle, and you can see how both legs of this stitch, here and here, are coming out of that stitch. So that's how you know the difference. Because I know at first it can be a little bit tricky to tell, is that a yarn over or is that a stitch? If you're a little newer to knitting, it might be a little confusing. So just always be looking, oh, are there 2 legs coming out of the stitch below? Okay, then we knit that. Or if there aren't, then you just drop it off your needle. And every once in a while you can kind of just pull up on that needle to elongate those stitches and kind of even everything out. All right, so you're just gonna continue this all the way across, and you'll see where you've got the 3 yarn overs, it's gonna be taller. You can see this is taller than it is over here. That's because we did 3 yarn overs instead of 2 yarn overs, so it's a different height. It's giving us a little more yarn when we pull up, so. Oh, I missed a couple of comments. Sorry about that. Go to summer piece for sure. We'll make a few different ones in different colors for next summer. Yeah, I know. This is actually a really addictive pattern, I feel like, because it's really fun to do those drop stitches because you'll be knitting back and forth and then you get that extra boost of your fabric going really fast when you do those drop stitches. All of a sudden it's twice as tall as it was before on the last row. And also it's just such a wearable piece. I feel like you can throw it on over a dress, you can wear it with like a little cami underneath it, you could even wear it with a button-down shirt as more of like a vest. I feel like it's really a versatile thing. And I have to say, when I first was working on this project, I envisioned this in sort of nautical colors. I was kind of thinking of doing this like in an off-white or a red or a navy. And then I ruled out navy because navy is too hard to see on camera. But that was my original vision. But then I asked one of my kids if they wanted this top, and this is the color that they chose. So, which I love. I love this color too. It just gives it a little bit of a different look. All right, so now we've moved across into the section right in front of the neck, and there are no yarn overs here. Okay, so because of that, we're just knitting straight across until we arrive at the next yarn over. And then we're gonna just drop those yarn overs off. So we're just kind of knitting until we see a yarn over, and just be paying attention so you don't accidentally knit the yarn overs. Here we go. There's my last stitch before the yarn over. Here's a yarn over. We're just gonna drop that one off. Knit the next one. Oh, and sometimes this will happen where your yarn over will cross over your stitch and it gets a little confusing. So if you see something crossing over, just try to pull it up in front and make sure, yep, that's actually a yarn over. We're gonna pull that off and then we're gonna knit this stitch. So that's also where it comes in handy to remember that if it's a true stitch and not a yarn over, then both legs will be coming out of the stitch below, and you'll be able to see that. So just every once in a while, you can just take a minute and just kind of pull on the bottom of your fabric to even out all of those elongated stitches. You can always do that later too, if you just want to work your way all the way across and then kind of even it out later by pulling on it, that's fine too. All right, got just a few more of these 3 yarn overs before we start. Oh, now we're into the 2 yarn overs, so that means we're pretty close to the end of our row. All right, just kind of evening them out. And you can see what we just did. Let me just kind of pull this out so you can see the different heights, right? So we have the 2 yarn overs here, the 3 yarn overs here, 2, then 1, then no yarn overs. So it's, you know, pretty narrow. And then the opposite is happening here, where we've got 1, then 2, then the 3s, those are the tallest ones, and then back down to the 2s over here, okay? So that is definitely the trickiest part, is that row number 3, just making sure that you're reading, you know, how many yarn overs you're doing and how many times you repeat that. And once you get all that, then you're just gonna start, actually, I'm gonna keep going on this sample just for a little bit more to show you the next row here. So we just dropped all those stitches. So the following row, so the last row that we did when we were dropping those stitches, that was a right side row. So we were knitting and dropping, knitting and dropping. And now we're looking at a wrong side row. So we know we're gonna be purling. So we're just gonna purl each stitch across. And this row is a little bit tricky because it's just kind of loose from those elongated stitches, so it doesn't feel as easy to knit across or as quick to knit across as it will on the following row. So you just have to take your time on this row here. You know, it just is a little bit wiggly because of those elongated stitches. Things just get a little bit loose and stretched out. That's fine. But what you're doing is you're just knitting every single stitch across. And then you're going to, on the next row, you're gonna purl across. I mean, sorry, did I say you're knitting this? You're purling every stitch across in this row. And then in the next row, you're gonna knit across, okay? So we're alternating purling on this side, knitting on the next side, purling, then knitting, so that we have that stockinette stitch that's between those drop stitches, those drop stitch stripes. So let me show you what that looks like when we get a little further along here. All right, so we have just finished up with that little stockinette section. So after you do the drop stitches, so you're dropping and knitting on that row, the following row, which I was just showing you, that was purling across. So starting with that purling row, you're gonna do 6 rows of stockinette, okay, starting with the purling row. So you'll do purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, and which is where we are right now. So you can see that little stockinette section. I know this looks weird because this is just a reduced sample, but I just wanted to show you, you know, this section is kind of to represent that first row of, this would be where the neck is, and this is kind of going up into the shoulder. just to kind of represent that. This is kind of a weird example just because this is such a condensed little piece. But just know, your row should be down here, the one where you did the drop stitches, and you should have 6 rows of stockinette above it. And then from this point on, you're just going to be working in an 8-row repeat. So the next row, so that would be on the purl side, after you've completed those 6 rows of stockinette. The next row is a purl row, but this is the row where we're adding those yarn overs. So we're going to be making those drop stitches or prepping those drop stitches on this row. So from here on out, every time you do your yarn overs, you're going to do 3 yarn overs at a time. So you're going to purl the first stitch, and then you're going to yarn over 3 times, and then you're going to purl the next stitch, yarn over 3 times, purl the next stitch, yarn over 3 times, and you're going to just do that all the way across. So we are no longer making some taller, some shorter. They're all going to be the same height. So it's very easy to memorize the rest of your piece. I mean, you basically know pretty much all you need to know. So 3 times and purl, 3 times and purl, 3 times, purl, 3 times, and purl, and purl. All right, I will show you the next row of dropping these stitches off, just so you can see that one more time. And then I'll show you how to finish your pieces. So you're just gonna, after you get into this striping pattern, this 8-row repeat, I do have specific numbers of times you can do your repeats, and that's what the yardage used or the quantities of yarn is based on. But you can absolutely do more or fewer repeats of the, this 8-row repeat. So you can make it longer, you could make a little, like, it would be really cute as a swimsuit cover up, I feel like, if you just kept going, or like a dress, or you can make it more cropped if you want. All right, here's my next row. We're going to be dropping off those yarn overs, but we're going to start by knitting the first stitch. So we knit 1, drop off those 3 yarn overs, knit the next stitch, drop off the next 3, knit, drop off your yarn overs, knit, drop off your yarn overs. In the pattern, I abbreviate the dropping off your yarn overs as just DYO. So if you see that in the pattern, I mean, there is an abbreviation, so there's a key, so you'll know what it means, but just if you're reading it through, that's how I'm abbreviating that term. So this pattern is so fun because when you get to dropping these stitches, it feels like you just speed up the process, and it helps break things up a little bit. It's you can definitely do this project while you're watching TV or, having a conversation with someone or something like that. It doesn't require a lot of concentration except for row number 3, where you really have to pay attention to how many yarn overs and how many repeats of stuff you're doing. But the rest of it is just really easy to do, kind of on autopilot, but it's nice because these drop stitches really kind of break it up a little bit and make you feel like, oh yeah, I'm zooming ahead here. Plus they make such a cool texture, nice airy top. It's like sort of like making lace, but just a little bit more simple. Okay. So I dropped my stitches, and then the next row we're going to purl, and then after that I'm going to show you just kind of how we finish off the bottom of this top, each piece. So you're going to be making these 2 pieces, and then we're going to seam them together, and I'm going to show you how to do the seaming as well. So So I'm just purling every stitch across this row, and this one again can be a little bit sloppy. If you get like a little loop like this, you just have to kind of pull on it until that loop disappears. Just needs to be distributed a little bit better. There we go. It does feel a little bit sloppy on this first, that first purl row after you do all your drop all your stitches, but you just have to sort of take your time with this row, and then it speeds up after that. Oh, and Crochet Girly, sorry I missed this earlier. They're saying this will give me a chance to practice my pearls. Yep. All right. So there's my last purl. And then I would, so that would be the first row in the stockinette section. That would count as the first row there. Oh, and just in case you're losing track of how many rows you do and it's confusing to count, if you take a look at your dropped elongated stitches, right? So here's a stitch, let me put my needle under it. Here's a stitch right here, an elongated stitch. You can see the little V that's directly above it. So this elongated stitch happened when we were making that purl row and wrapping it. This little V happened when we were making our knit stitch and dropping the yarn overs right here. So this is the row where we're basically elongating the stitches. This little V that's directly above elongated stitch, okay? And so this would be our first purl row right here. So I just wanted to show you that in case you're having trouble telling how many rows that you have worked, and it's hard, those drop stitches are a little bit unusual, for counting rows, and people might not quite know how to count those. All right, so I'm just gonna knit all the way across here. And just know you would be doing your repeats of, dropping the stitches and do 6 rows of stockinette, dropping the stitches, 6 rows of stockinette, until it's about the right length. And I do have instructions, written in the directions, like at this point, it should be 3 inches, shorter than the targeted length, and then you do one more partial repeat where you're just repeating the stockinette section and not the dropping, making the yarn overs or dropping the yarn overs, those 2 rows. And then after that, you're going to just do 3 rows of knitting. So you're going to knit on the right side and on the wrong side as well, and that's what creates this sort of like a little garter ridge at the bottom of the top. So you would get done with, let's see, finish with row number 10, which is a knit row like what we just did. You'd have a couple more rows of stockinette here. And then on for the next 3 rows, you would knit across the purl side, and you'd turn your work, knit across the knit side, then knit across the purl side. And then when you do, actually I'll do one more row of knitting here, and then I'll show you how to do the bind off. Just in case you don't remember how to do a basic bind off, that's what I'm going to teach you how to do next. So, oops, I'm purling by accident. Let me back those up. I was just kind of going on autopilot there. Okay, so we're knitting this row. This is a knit row. So because we're just imagining this is the last row before we do the bind off. So when you're knitting on the reverse side, knitting on the purl side, it's going to create those purl bumps on the right side, and that makes a nice little ridge at the bottom hemline. So that's why I chose to switch it up at the very bottom there, and also it keeps it from curling. There we go. And here we are on the right side. So we're just gonna see how we have those little purl bumps now on the knitted side. Okay, so that's to represent, let me just show you actually what this bottom looks like. So the bottom hemline of your top has these little ridges down here, and that's from making knit stitches when you're working across the purl side for those last, last 3 stitches last 3 rows, sorry. So you get this nice little kind of garter ridge at the very bottom. Okay, so let's just say we already had our garter ridge. We worked those 3 knitted rows across the bottom. Oh, we've got a question here. Does it make a difference if a yarn over gets caught in the knit stitch as you're dropping them off the needle? Oh, like if you're knitting into your yarn over and into your knit stitch? I'm guessing that's what you mean. I mean, you may be able to see it. If you can't see it by looking at it, it's not. So if you knit into your knit stitch at the same time, if you knit into your yarn over at the same time you're knitting into your knit stitch, it's not going to change your stitch count, because your yarn overs, you just add those in there and then you just get rid of all the yarn overs, like right after, when you're elongating them, right? So you're not going to change your stitch count by doing that, but you might be able to see it's going to be a little tiny bit shorter right there. I think it's not going to be very noticeable. So if it doesn't bother you, it certainly doesn't bother me, and you can block it probably. Like if you notice it later, which I think would be probably not very likely, you can kind of just pull on it a little bit to just help those stitches be about the same length as each other, the elongated stitches. So I think you can kind of work it out. I would say if you notice it right away, just go back and fix it, because I don't know, that's just my method if I notice it right away. But if it's later and you don't really see it, if you just kind of are going across the next row and you're like, oh, it looks like I combined those, you can kind of play with it a little bit and pull on it just a little bit, just to make sure your stitches are all fairly even across that section and it doesn't just sort of dip down. Because what'll happen is if you're knitting into that one of those yarn overs at the same time you're knitting your knit stitch, it's just not going to be as tall as it's supposed to be, right? Because you're taking up some of that slack. So I guess that's not kind of a non-answer, but I always hate telling people, like, you have to go back and rip that out, because sometimes for people it's like, you're not going to see it, and it can kind of make you hate your knitting if it's too frustrating sometimes, especially if like you're a beginner working on this project. I think if you look at it and it bugs you, you should go back and rip it out. Or you can actually, on the next row, you can just undo a stitch and drop it down, pull the yarn over out, and then knit back up. I don't know if you guys have ever done that before, but you can use a crochet hook, or you can even use your knitting needles to kind of crochet your knit stitches back up, like pulling one loop through the next to fix them. If you guys have never done that before, if you guys are newer to knitting, definitely worth checking out fixing a dropped stitch or fixing a knitted stitch down below by releasing the stitch on your needle, letting it undo, fixing it down below, and knitting it back up. So that would be another way to fix it too. Okay, so now I just want to show you the bind off real quick here. So we're going to go ahead and knit that first stitch, and then we're going to knit the second stitch. And then we're going to pull that first stitch up over the loop towards the tip. So first stitch over the second stitch and to drop it off. Okay, so we're going to do that again. Knit the next stitch. Use our left hand needle to pull the right hand loop up over that next stitch like that. And when I do this bind off, because this is such a stretchy top, I intentionally let these get kind of loose. Like, see, that's actually pretty loose right there. It just tends to want to get loose, I feel like, because everything else is so loose. If you're having problems and this is feeling tight, then just switch to a larger needle in order to help you keep these loops from getting too tight here. Because this is the loop that's going to restrict the bottom edge of your top, and you don't want it to be tight across there. So I'm going to go ahead and knit this. Pull that stitch over the next, And if you need to, you can tug on that loop just a tiny bit to make it loose, a little bit looser. Okay, so this is just the method that I use for binding off this top. I think it looks nice. It has enough stretch, and it looks neat and tidy. All right, so you just do that all the way across your top, and then you'll fasten off, pull your last strand through the last working loop to finish it off, and then give yourself a nice long yarn tail, because you can use that for stitching, for seaming your pieces together. So that's the next thing I want to show you guys. So I'm going to put this upside down. This is, well, maybe we'll back out just a little bit here so that we can see a little bit more. Just for a second, and then we'll get a little closer when I do the stitching. So I've got two pieces here. So this one is upside down on the table, this top one, and you can see this is the neckline right here. There we go, that looks good. And then we've got the other piece, and by the way, these pieces are identical. There's no front or back. They're the same, okay? And then we're going to just match up where those little stitch markers are. So we've got one here and one here. So you can just go ahead and choose one or the other, and I'm just gonna basically use it as a pin. To sort of pin them together like that. And this is a starting point, okay? You can certainly change where this is. You can move it out here if you feel like you needed a bigger neck hole to get your head through. You can move it that way. You can move it this way if you feel like the neck hole is too big. But that was just sort of a starting point, a guesstimation to help you guys get things started for fitting. So I would definitely recommend using those stitch markers along here. And then also, you might want to, before you start seaming everything, you might want to just check the length of this on. Just try it on, because it just takes a second. You can just sort of pin these together with your stitch marker, pull it on over your head, and then just check the length and see if you like how that is. And then you can adjust from there before you start doing your side seams, so you don't have to take anything out for an alteration later, right? So, and this, because I did this with that twisted, the German twisted cast on, this has some stretch to it. So this is a good location for me to be seaming from here to here. But if you did like a slightly tighter cast on, you could certainly move this out just a little bit. I would start with like maybe a 1/2 inch, you know, maybe a stitch or two towards the shoulder or towards the arm opening, you know, to make that a larger opening. You know, these were planned, or the shaping was planned for this area to have the tallest yarn overs right here and to have them meeting up. But if you move them over a little this way or this way, it is so flexible and so stretchy that it's not really gonna matter. So you can certainly, you have a little bit of wiggle room there to adjust. All right, so I'm gonna use this yarn tail. This is my beginning yarn tail. And I'm just gonna thread that onto a yarn needle. And I feel like for this project, I really like to use a slightly smaller yarn needle like this, or if you have a larger one but it has a sharp tip, that also works really well too, because it just helps to get this buried into your yarn strands to have a smaller needle here. So I like to do a whip stitch along the 2 shoulder edges, and then I try it on, and then I pin the side seams, and then I do a mattress stitch on the side seams. But you can do any seaming method that you prefer. Totally up to you. I'm just going to show you those 2 methods here. So to do the whip stitch, we're just going to grab some strands from this side and 2 strands from this side and pull on that. Again, 2 strands from that side, 2 strands from this side, like that. And I like these to be, you know, when I pull on that, I'm not making it so tight that it's going to start restricted. I do like this shoulder to stretch just a little tiny bit. I don't want to, because this might end up stretching a little, and then we don't want this to hold it in. But what you're looking for is you just want, when you do your whip stitch, you want that little loop to come close to your fabric. Give it a little light tug. I'm not really pulling too hard, just so that it kind of cinches those 2 edges together. Just like that. So we're just gonna do this all the way across. If you prefer a different method, maybe you wanna do a mattress stitch here, or maybe you wanna do, you know, a different kind of a stitch, you can absolutely do that here. Okay, I see. Oh, that makes sense to you, Crochet Girly 96. Awesome. Okay. Oh, we have another comment here. Cute shirt. Oh, this shirt or this shirt? Thank you for both, or either, I guess. I actually haven't started knitting yet, but have yarn and just got a couple sets of needles. Your teaching sounds very approachable, so I'm saving this video for probably much later. Thanks. Awesome. Yeah, I would say I really think that, you know, this is a great. Like if you've never made another top before, I think this is a really good one to start out with, just because it has so much drape and it's such a flattering shape. You don't have to worry so much about getting it to the perfect size, because that can be really stressful, I think. You know, sometimes you make your knitted gauge swatch and you think everything's gonna be great. Oh, and maybe I'll mention that too. If you are really new to knitting, you might be like, why are we making a gauge swatch, Brenda? Tell me about that. So everybody knits different, and you need to make sure that when you're making the same number of stitches it says in the pattern, that your stitches are going to end up the same size as the person who designed it. So there's no right or wrong gauge. It's just that the designer tells you, this is my gauge, you have to meet my gauge. Otherwise, if you follow the instructions with the same number of stitches and rows and all that, your piece won't turn out the same if your stitches are a different size. You know, like if I make my stitches much looser than you do, then your piece might be too small when you're finished with it if you follow the instructions. So that's why we check our gauge. So there are instructions, specific instructions for following, you know, for making a gauge swatch and measuring it and all that. And if you find that your gauge swatch, if you make it and your gauge swatch is bigger than what it's supposed to measure, that means you need to try it again with smaller knitting needles. Or if it's smaller, then you need to try it again with bigger knitting needles. And you can go up 1 or 2 sizes just depending on how off it was. You know, it's also, you know, if you're using a yarn that's not the same thickness as I use, that's going to alter things as well, because you want to make sure you like the resulting fabric, right? And the gauge that I have is basically like a nice loose, you know, larger stitches, so it can be a really flowy top. So it'll change the look of it. If you are using a thicker yarn and you meet my gauge, it may be okay, but if it's too much thicker and you're making you know, if you meet the same gauge as I do, it might look a little different. It might hang a little different. Okay, so I'm just weaving in my ends here. And then you would do that for the opposite shoulder as well, of course. Okay, so you're gonna get the 2 shoulders stitched up, and then you can put it on and just sort of put some stitch markers in underneath where you want the armhole to end and then the side seam to begin. Now, if you're like, oh, I can't really reach that when it's on me, you can guess ahead of time, like just by looking at it. Oh, I should mention too, I blocked these pieces. I forgot to mention that. Blocking, if you're new to knitting, blocking means you're just sort of treating your fabric either with steam or with water to make your stitches kind of behave a little better. So to make them all look a little more uniform, you can stretch one piece to match the dimensions of another piece if they ended up 2 different sizes because your gauge was really different from one week to the next or whenever you made those pieces. You can kind of fix a lot of things with blocking. Also, for this stitch pattern in particular, you're going to notice that these drop stitches are kind of puffy and they look all kind of like they're kind of, I don't know, maybe wrinkly. I don't know if that's the right word, but they're not going to hang nice and perfect looking unless you block it. So you can block it with steam, where you hover an iron over it. Don't touch the iron to the fabric, but just hover it over and give it some steam and pat it into place. My favorite method for this top is to wet block it. Just put it in a sink with some water, let it soak for an hour or two, come back, squeeze out as much water as you can, and then just lay it flat on a towel and take the time to like shape it nicely and make it look, you know, how you want it to. Okay, so at one of these little stockinette sections, you're going to place that stitch marker, and that's going to be the bottom of the armhole. So I'm going to say it's probably either between this one or this one. I'm going to make it maybe here. So you want to make sure that this is big enough for the circumference of your bicep or wherever it hits you. Oh, and I need to talk about that just a little bit too in just a second. So, you know, if you're not really sure, maybe place it a little lower so you can put it on, and then you can decide if you want to move it up, try it on again. I would, if at all possible, I think it looks the best if you seam from the top to the bottom of that stockinette section instead of starting part way, but you can start part way. So I think for this top, I might end up starting part way through that stockinette section. So I'm just gonna place the pin right in the middle of that stockinette section. This is something though that I would try on, you know, see if you like the size of the armhole and adjust accordingly before you start sewing, okay? And I am going to place this at the bottom. And then I would put a couple of stitch markers in between as well, just to kind of keep things in place as you're sewing it. It will be obvious though, because you can only sew the sections that are the stockinette sections. You can't actually sew the dropped stitches together. You just let them, you know, be separate, because that's basically what this is, right? So it's just a bunch of little yarns going vertical, and that's what's going to happen right on that side seam, even if you don't sew that together. Can't really sew it together there. You're just going to be sewing the little stockinette sections. Okay, so back to what I was talking about the arm's eye and where it's hitting your arm. So I wish I would have remembered to mention this at the beginning, but for those of you, if you are making the largest sizes of this top, just know that because the circumference of the top, you know, needs to match your body measurements, and the circumference of the top right here from this distance to this distance, that also affects how long your shoulder seams are. So the wider your top is, the longer those shoulder seams. And so that might mean for the largest sizes, your shoulder might be dropped lower here on your body. It might be coming down your arm further than on my top, which are a little bit closer to my shoulder. They kind of bend around a little bit, a couple inches maybe. So for the smallest sizes, you're gonna have the shortest sort of sleeve, if you can call it a sleeve, whatever comes down after the tip of your shoulder. For the largest sizes, you're gonna have a longer sleeve or a longer sleeve seam here, shoulder seam here. If you don't like that, I do have notes in your pattern on how you could start by making a smaller size. When you begin knitting, you work your way down, making a smaller size, and then when you get to the arm's eye, or just below where you want your arm's eye to be, you'll have to check this, then you're going to add more stitches by casting on at the beginning of the next 2 rows, and that way you'll have a shorter shoulder seam, but then it'll be the correct width. You know, you'll have enough width to get around your largest measurement around your body. So I do have little notes in there for modification, because I really like my patterns to be size inclusive and for everybody to be happy with how things look when they're done. All right, so when I'm doing my mattress stitch, I usually put my hand behind it, or maybe I'll set it on the table so you can see it a little better. We'll do that. I'm just going to be going from one side to the other here, going back and forth and catching a little, for this section, the garter stitch section, I'm just going to be catching that little ridge right there. Going to pull that through. And then I like to go back down in this direction from top to bottom and make like a complete circle before I start, because that really lines up that bottom edge nicely. So here I am. I'm going to go up to that next little ridge and go down here. So this is sort of like a modified mattress stitch, because I'm making like these little circles, and I do that for the bottom because I want it to be sturdier, but also because I really want those ridges to match up nicely. We're going to go down here and up through the same ridge that we already went through. I'm going to move this over just a little bit here. Okay, so now we're going to be seaming right next to this first stitch. Actually, yeah, I probably should have made a little bit of a thicker seam there. I'm going to go in just a little bit right here to the next purl stitch over, just to help this look a little bit more seamless, and pull that in. There we go. Okay, because now we're going to be stitching just on the just to the left of this last row of knit stitches, and just to the right of this column of knit stitches. And we're going to grab a little from each side. So you're going to go under 2 strands right there, and then come over to the other side and go underneath 2 strands over here. So these are between those columns of knit stitches. And then you're going to go underneath the same strand you just, or where your yarn came out right here. Going underneath those 2. And then we're going to go in over here where we came out, and we're going to go underneath those 2 on this side. Basically you're just, and then you can kind of pull and see how that moves those 2 little columns right next to each other. So we're going to go underneath 2 strands here, and underneath 2 strands here. And every time you go in, right now I'm going in where my yarn tail had already come out. Okay, so we came out right here earlier. We're going to go underneath these 2 and underneath this one here. And then I like to do just a little stitch in the opposite direction, just like I'm doing basically like a circle around, because that isn't part of doing the mattress stitch, but that's to kind of anchor this in place before I move up to the next section. Okay, so before, what I was saying, you can't really sew these 2 together. I mean, that's not going to do any good. You'll do that and it'll just call attention to it and it'll look kind of weird. So you just pretend that this is one of those drop stitches, and then you come up here and go underneath those 2 strands to continue our mattress stitch. So we're going to go up there and watch as this disappears. I'm going to put it over my thumb here. You just want that to be the same length as all the other loops. Okay, and once it is, then you can come over here, and I like to do a full complete circle. I'm going to go down under 2 loops. And if you're looking at this and thinking, I don't understand where she's sewing, it's okay to do a whip stitch along this edge. It's okay to do a different style of mattress stitch. There are other styles as well. It's okay to do any kind of stitch here, as long as you're stitching these 2 edges together and you're not trying to stitch these loops together. And I just wanted to let you know that it's all right to have those sort of like a float from one row to the next row, if that makes sense. All right, so I'll go up a little more and show you that one more time, transitioning from one to the next. From one stockinette section to the next. Pull those together, and then I like to do this, going down and around one more time, just to kind of anchor that in place. When you pull on it, if it doesn't cinch this up, then you're good to move on to the next stockinette area. So you're going to go up here and pull on that until this loop is the same length as all the rest, just like that. And we're going to just do one circle before we continue moving. The circle thing, that is something that I like to do, just anchor the yarn and make sure that it is not going to start like if I snag it here, I don't want the whole seam to just cinch up. All right, so you just continue stitching your way up. So you can see here we have these two are stitched together. You can see how nice those look. And you know, our little yarn float is going up through here and up through here, and it blends in with all the rest of that stuff. So just want to let you know, you're only seaming these sections, you're just floating the yarn across to the next section. So you're just going to stitch that all the way up until wherever your stitch marker is, and then just weave in your ends really good so they can't unravel, and then you can give it another little shot of steam on the side. That kind of helps that seam look a little bit less bulky, helps it kind of look a little less like there's a seam there. And then you're done, and that's it. Let me just check and see if I missed anything here. Let's see. Oh, and Crochet Girlie's excited to learn a new cast on. Awesome. Yeah, that German twisted cast on, I use that all the time. It's my go-to. I just love it because it has just the right amount of stretch for a lot of things. A little more stretch than the long tail cast on, and it looks really nice along that edge. So I just use it, I pretty much use it all the time unless there's a reason to use a different cast on. All right. Oh, okay, thank you. I'm glad you like the shirt and the shirt I'm wearing. Maybe I gave myself that compliment. That's funny. Okay, you guys, thank you so much for being here and for being active in the chat. I really appreciate that. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in my next live event. Bye, everybody.